Well, hello, everyone. It is my pleasure today to be talking with Bruce Kiesling, who is the music director of the Sequoia Symphony, and that's based in Visalia. I suspect that a lot of people in Fresno aren't fully aware that it is there. So Bruce, first of all, thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Do you find that sometimes you run into people from Fresno who don't realize that Tulare County has its own fine orchestra?
Yeah, I mean, we run into people in Visalia that don't even know that we have an orchestra, let alone a fully professional orchestra in town. But that seems to be the case everywhere. You know, I've worked with orchestras not only here in California, but in North Carolina and Florida and Michigan. And we still, in all of those communities, wherever I've worked, we're always shocked. We run into people and they're like, there's an orchestra here? And until we do Star Wars or something like that, then they're like, well, if I knew you were doing Star Wars, I would have come a long time ago. Things like that.
It's always a challenge to reach out to your audience. There's a lot of things that are competing for people's attention all the time. But you do have sort of like almost a window here. I was thinking about this in terms of the pandemic. People might be more likely to get online and do some exploring.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's especially true. And we've seen this sort of nationally in trends with orchestras. Yes, they're engaging their community with their online content, but what's really striking is how much they're reaching beyond that. And I don't just mean geographically necessarily people who don't live here, but people that may live here, but just aren't even aware of it.
So of course, you, like every other performing arts group in the country, you've had to adapt to the pandemic, and you are holding this series of digital concerts. And one thing I was interested to see is that rather than doing just a few long full-length concerts or close to an hour, you're doing a series of shorter episodes, I guess you could say. What made you decide between the shorter versus the longer?
Well, it was really very, very conscious decision back in the summer when we decided initially just to delay or really cancel all of our live performances through at least February. That was our first chunk that we canceled. And when we decided to go online with these digital performances, we thought it was really important to design these for the way that we think they will be consumed. And that means people looking at their phones, looking at their tablets, maybe sitting at a computer. It's very unlikely someone's going to sit down for 45 minutes in front of their computer. We thought, look, let's make some really short videos in the 6 to 10 minute range that are just little snapshots, because that's what people are really looking at when they're looking at YouTube, when they're looking online on their phones, etc., Facebook, all of that sort of social media. You just want a little snapshot. And because we decided initially right away to give these away rather than try to ticket them, we thought our goal is just to define our brand and to reach beyond the audience, connect with our existing audience, and reach beyond it. The other thing that was really important to us is to kind of capture the vibe of what our concerts are like. And we were really lucky in that the filmmakers that we worked with, Go Creative Group, the Niccolo Go, who runs that organization, he has been a subscriber. So he knew our orchestra, he knew me. And so he was like, hey, I know you always talk before the concert. You do like a little pre-show about the piece that's sort of humorous and entertaining, but at the same time, informative. So it was really important to capture that. So if someone comes to a live concert, when we go back to doing that they would recognize the whole vibe of the thing.
And I have to say that your opening segments, well, first of all, they're just gorgeous, because who else in the world gets to stand in front of a giant sequoia, right?
Yeah, we were very lucky with that. And when we talked about where to film it, there was talk at the theater or in downtown Visalia or something. And I sort of said, hey, let's go to the park and really lean into our identity as the Sequoia Symphony. This was in the last several years, we changed the name from the formerly known as the Tulare County Symphony. But we wanted to really lean into that. And it was just such a stunning setting. And we spent 2 days sort of trekking all over the sequoias to get that footage, which was a lot of fun. We're actually going up in a couple more weeks because we have 3 more to film.
I do want to play just a little clip from one of the past episodes that you have done. Is there one that you would like to kind of highlight or that you are particularly proud of?
Yeah, we're proud of all of them for sure. Certainly the Appalachian Spring excerpt that we did, the variations on a shaker tune, I thought the orchestra played particularly beautifully in that. So we love that one. We're really proud of, presenting some composers maybe that people don't always come across. So we have a piece by George Walker and Florence Price, the two African-American composers that aren't played enough. So we really wanted to include, again, this sense of like, over the course of these 10 episodes, there will eventually be 10. Over the course of them, there's everything that you would hear in the course of a season with the orchestra if you were to go. So we're proud of all of them. And the orchestra really, I think, just really rose to the challenge and played beautifully for these.
Tell us about that filming process. What was it like?
Yeah, so everything that's been released so far was all filmed back in August. So we took 3 days in August and we filmed the first 7 performances over those 3 days. So it was pretty intense. One day we actually did 3, and then the other 2 days we did 2. 3 was too much, we found. We were like, no more 3 service days, because we actually rehearse it and record it in the same service, essentially. So within 2.5 hours, we come in, rehearse the piece, record it, and film it. Now, as a reminder, as you said, they're very short. So we're not talking about 20 minutes of music in general. I think the longest piece we did was like 8 minutes. So with a professional orchestra like ours, you can certainly polish up that amount of music. But in terms of filming and getting great audio of it, that was a lot to do. And we definitely used pretty much every minute of it to make sure that we had all the angles that we needed. And in general, we start videoing right away as soon as we start rehearsing it. So we actually capture video of the rehearsal. And then after we get to a sort of a certain point of polish, we try to take 2 or 3 takes just for audio, just for clean audio. And then actually we go back and film, we play it again a couple more times just to be sure we have all the angles. So the filmmakers filmed us playing the piece several consecutive times, and then they're able to piece that together. But again, this was really specifically by design, because we thought we are not capturing a performance here. We are making a little movie here, and that is an incredibly different process. And we wanted to make sure we made the most compelling video. And so as far as like doing a start to finish, 1 take and, okay, we're gonna do it, this is it, there was really no value in that, I thought, considering we were not doing a performance. This was not meant to be a snapshot of a live performance, but instead a film. And if you're making a film, you do that really, really differently.
So in terms of safety precautions, I noticed that you use mostly strings, but yes, you did have some wind players. You had a couple of French horns. What did you have to worry about in terms of COVID?
Yeah, so we took some standard COVID precautions across the field. Back in August, this wasn't really set, but by now, we're actually recording the last of these tomorrow. But so now it's pretty set. We're basically at least 6 feet apart for all players, regardless of the instrument. String, if you can play masked, which basically means anyone but a wind player, you are masked. And for these last set, actually, we did require a negative COVID test for the wind and brass players only, since they would be sort of blowing into their instrument within a week or 2 before we did it. So some unions are doing 10 feet apart for those players. We would love to do that, but honestly, just our stage is not that big. The last couple that we're doing have the larger orchestra. We have as many as 30 players. And in order to do that, we actually had to extend our stage. So we rented extra staging so that our stage could be 8 feet longer to accommodate the bigger group and still have everyone social distanced. So yeah, we were all masked the whole time, those of us that could, including me. There was some discussion about it. And I was pretty insistent that no, even I think as the conductor, I should be masked, because I didn't want the story to be, are they masked or not? Or was this dangerous? Like, we're all doing, we're all taking responsibility. I've been COVID tested, I think 7 or 8 times already now. So just trying to keep up with it and know that I'm taking care of myself and I'm not putting anyone else at risk.
Well, let's talk about the next episode that is coming out, and that will be on January 29th.
Right, exactly. And this one is the Prokofiev American Overture. And this, as it so happens, this is the longest piece we're doing. And I think, again, it's about 8 minutes. So even with the introduction that I have, it'll be probably right around 10 or just under 10 minutes. And that's our longest episode of the entire, 10 episodes that we'll do. But we're really excited about this one. And again, it's music by obviously a composer that people would recognize. I mentioned earlier, we did a lot of maybe lesser known composers, and we tried to front load those with Walter Piston, Florence Price, and George Walker. And now that we're in sort of the meat of the season here in the middle, we're looking at Stravinsky. We did a great piece by Aaron Copland, and then now this piece by Prokofiev. And this, as I said, is the American Overture, not a piece that many people know. Although there is a full orchestra version of this, it's kind of written for this weird amalgam of lots of wind instruments and just a few string players, cellos and basses only. So when I heard it, I thought it was an unusual combination, and 2 pianos and 2 harps and lots of percussion. And so I thought, wow, let's include that so that we're kind of doing something to focus on the winds. Because as you said, across the country, really in the world, so much string rep is getting played that I thought this might be a chance to kind of do something different in that. And again, not a piece that you hear. This was actually written while Prokofiev was in New York City. And it's kind of meant to capture that cacophony of being in this kind of great world capital with kind of this, barrage of people going all over town with destinations. And he's like, it seems so confusing on the surface, but yet it somehow has all of this order.
So another thing that we should mention is that you also have a series that you call just musical moments, and that's on the Sequoia Symphony website. And they're a lot of fun. I guess you film them by yourself, and they're pretty irreverent. I love the one that you did about why is classical music stuffy, and how you talked about how composers, we tend to think of old composers as really old because we see these photos of them when they're near death. And I just had to laugh at that.
Well, yeah, I do. That really captures sort of the vibe of what these videos are meant to be. I started these in June just as a way to sort of do something artistic and talk about stuff that I'm so passionate about. And so they kind of run the gamut. They're all over the place. I have kind of a couple of series within that larger series. So I have a whole series on form, because people always say, so what's a concerto? Like, what does that mean? So there's a series that are 2-minute versus 2-minute explanation of form. And so in 2 minutes, I tell you kind of what a symphony is, or what a concerto is, or what a rondo. And then other times it's just kind of me waxing philosophical about things that I find to be ridiculous about our field. And as you said, that not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, I did one about photos, because it does, you'll see this piece. Well, he wrote it when he was 26 years old, and he was all full of excitement and just came back from Paris and studying with Nadia Boulanger. And he was so, wanted to just redefine American music. And then the picture we show is maybe a 70 or 80-year-old version of that composer. And I just think, well, no wonder people have this idea that composers aren't these vibrant, vital people. When you play the music of Chopin or something, who was like so tortured with love, or Berlioz, and oh my gosh, the stories of Berlioz, like, he fell in love with his actress he saw on stage and chased her around Europe. And yet we'll show this picture of Berlioz that makes him look, an octogenarian or something. And I just think that there's sort of a dissonance there that I don't think serves us. And so I think in that, I showed a picture of Robert Pattinson. I like to say these artists were these bohemian, sort of steamy characters. And I think, certainly if you come to a concert that I do, I talk about that part of it. I love the idea that these composers are real people. They got up in the morning and had breakfast, and then wrote some music, and then went to the pub with their friends. And I just think that's important for us as we present their music.
And you specifically mentioned Brahms in that
totally.
In that example, right? So Brahms was a bit of a drinker. Is that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Brahms been drinking every single day. And I mentioned Brahms again this last week too, because he wrote this piece, the Academic Festival Overture, and which in that he was kind of commissioned by a school that was giving him an honorary doctorate. And they wanted this big serious symphony, and Brahms wrote this much shorter overture. But in all the tunes in the overture were student drinking songs from the pub that he had heard when he had gone and visited campus. Those two people.
Well, it's just remembering that composers were humans, just like the rest of us. So, now, can you tell us just a little bit more about the Sequoia Symphony, just a little backstory, and then a little bit about yourself? You've been there for 11 years, and it sounds like you've had a fascinating career. So what can you tell us?
Well, thanks. Yeah, the orchestra of the Sequoia Symphony is the fully professional orchestra based in Visalia, California. When I came to the orchestra 11 years ago, at that time it was called the Tulare County Symphony. But over the years, we actually started talking about a name change within my first 3 months there. But it probably took us 8 years to actually get that done. It's a big process to rebrand us. But we just thought that was more accurately reflected the fully professional nature of the orchestra, which had been the case when I came in. Of course, like many orchestras, it started out as an amateur group, and then they started paying everybody just a little bit here, and then over the years, more and more. And certainly, I think since I've been there, the budget has grown from maybe 275,000 to over 700. So it's been an incredible 10 years of growth, both in terms of artistic, what we're doing. We played Rite of Spring and Firebird, but we've also done films with orchestra. We did Psycho and Casablanca and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we hopefully be doing lots more of those. So we've really tried to grow the artistic profile of the orchestra, and most importantly, continue to sell tickets. We're really lucky, and we bring musicians in from City or Philadelphia, and some of them will be like, well, I'm coming here to play. I remember a violinist came in from, sorry, here comes my dogs, they're very excited. He came in from New York City and was going to play the Edgar Meyer violin concerto in this small town in California. And he's like, wow, you got 1,000 people here, to come see this piece. And we're like, well, we're really lucky that our community continues to come out for us. And they've kind of followed us as we have ventured into more ambitious repertoire. So we definitely have enjoyed that. Myself, I'm from Canton, Ohio, so grew up in the Midwest and went to college in Michigan. And so I spent 10 years there with undergrad and graduate school as well. And then my first job was with the Greensboro Symphony in North Carolina, where I was the resident conductor there for 8 years before coming to California. I'm based in Los Angeles, so I actually live here and then commute up for things when I need to be in Visalia. And also I commute up to Michigan, where I have another professional orchestra there, the Adrian Symphony. So I used to work for the Los Angeles Philharmonic. I did their youth orchestra program here, which is called YOLA, or the Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, and the Pasadena Symphony as well. I was their assistant conductor for a while.
What can we look forward to beyond next week's new episode? How many do you have following that?
We have 3 more after next week. So next week will be the 7th of the 10. And we're really excited about the last 3. As I said, we hired a bigger orchestra. These are the ones that we taped last week and this week. And so a little bit larger group next week. We're actually doing the finale from Tchaikovsky's Second Piano Concerto, which is just one of the happiest, most buoyant pieces. When we were doing the recording session, I said to the players, I was like, there's something about this music that makes the 5-year-old version of me just want to march. Like, I just want to march around. It's so joyous and happy. And so we have a pianist who came up from the Colburn School and now lives in Los Angeles. He was trained there, but now based here, and just plays the heck out of it. So a really thrilling piece. And then in the next 2 episodes as well, we're doing some music of Leonard Bernstein, his music from the ballet Fancy Free, which we have a dancer coming in from New York and a couple other dancers. So that's the one we're doing as kind of a movie with a soundtrack with some live dancing as part of that. So we're really excited about that, because that'll be shot on location in one of Visalia's wonderful restaurants. And then the final episode is a piece by Siegmeister, a composer not enough people know, Ellie Siegmeister, and it's called the Western Suite. We're doing Prairie Morning, the first movement from that. And that will kind of be like a look back on the season, and we're taking that opportunity to kind of show you some of behind the scenes of how it came together. So you actually see shots of the filmmakers making the film.
Do you think that some of what you've learned and what we've all learned during the pandemic is kind of rub off on the way orchestras interact with its audiences in the future?
We hope so, for sure. I mean, that's the big question, I think, going forward. How many orchestras and other kinds of performing arts organizations will say, oh, thank God, we can just go back to doing what we always did. I think there's some people who are just kind of waiting it out. But we have already begun to really think and strategize. Okay, we learned so much about how to do this. We learned what works for us, what maybe was really challenging for us and for the audience. And what's the best way now that some sort of digital presence, some sort of social media work, online concerts, et cetera, what's the best way for that to complement our existing programs? And I think that it's a huge opportunity for us to see how we can take advantage of what we learned and pair that with our existing live programs. As you said, hopefully we'll be back to doing those maybe by October, we hope. That's our hope anyway, to be back sort of with live concerts in the fall. And then what role does a couple of these digital performances, what role can that play? Are we doing trailers for the concerts? Are we doing complementary repertoire that might pair well with it? Or are we doing its own sort of separate thing that maybe is quite different? I think that all those are possibilities. And the other thing that I think is major is what can we do in terms of our education programs?
I am so happy that we were able to talk this morning. I think this is so exciting and is yet another great option of how you can support local organizations even during the pandemic.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being aware of it. I'm glad that you asked for me to be on here, and we really appreciate all that you do in our community to really call attention. During the best of times, yes, but especially now when all of us are kind of looking for ways to connect with our audience, because I think that's our role as a community organization is to bring people together around, in our case, around music. And so that this whole process has been a search for us to do that, to say, how can we bring people together around music? And so we really appreciate you noticing it and taking time to call it out. Thanks.
Well, you're very welcome. And happy playing tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we're looking forward to that. It'll be our last recording session. So we'll be glad to wrap that up.